So I've decided that um, I couldn't find a way to put stories I've written on here. So my cousin gave me an idea to just read them to you. So today I'll be reading you one of a short story I wrote called Love Thy Neighbor. And all the ideas are completely original and I didn't steal it from anybody or anything on TV or anything. Okay, I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. The school bell rang. Jimmy Richards ran out of the door of his classroom and headed towards his locker. His friend Cameron Jennings walked up to him, but he had a glum look on his face. My family's moving to Florida, Cameron said. When are you guys leaving? Jimmy asked. Well, my mom told us last night, so I'm not really sure, Cameron concluded. Cameron and Jimmy had been friends since second grade. Jimmy thought it was kind of sad that they had only known each other for 5 years, since they were both now in fifth grade. He closed his locker shut with a frown. He walked down the steps. His mother sat waiting patiently in their family's car. Jimmy walked to the car, opened the door, and fell into the seat. What's wrong, sweetie? Marge Richards asked her son. Well, Cameron's moving away, and now I won't have any friends, Jimmy said. What about that nice boy that lives on Mountain Rock Pass Road? Marge asked. Mom, seriously, he's a freak, Jimmy replied. With that, she started the car and drove towards home. As soon as Jimmy opened the door, he was given a noogie by his 16-year-old sister, Tamara. What's up, Shrimpo? Tamara asked. None of your business, Jimmy replied. Marge walked in through the door. Where do you think you're going, young lady? Marge asked. Tamara rolled her eyes. I'm going to Tammy's house to study for the math test tomorrow, Tamara replied. Since when did you ever care so much about studying? Marge asked. Whatever, Tamara whined. She walked out the front door and slammed it shut. Somebody's cranky, Marge said. Jimmy took his shoes off, threw his backpack in the corner, and plopped on the couch. It was the weekend, and nothing could ruin it, or at least he thought. Chapter 2. Jimmy awoke to the sounds of trucks. He looked out his window. A moving truck sat parked in Cameron's driveway. He quickly got dressed and ran over to Cameron's house. The truck loaded a couch, and they closed the door. Cameron walked up to Jimmy. Guess this is goodbye, Cameron said. Yep, Jimmy replied. Goodbye, old pal, Cameron said. They hugged, then Cameron got in their family Chevrolet. Jimmy watched as the truck turned the corner and disappeared out of sight. A single tear fell on the ground as Jimmy slowly walked back to his house. When Jimmy opened the door, a rubber band shot at him. Tamara stepped out of the hallway. Is the little baby gonna cry? Tamara smirked. Shut up and leave me alone, Jimmy yelled. His mom suddenly appeared. What's going on here? Marge asked. Tamara shot a rubber band at me, and I'm sad because Cameron moved, Jimmy answered. Marge glared at her daughter. Tamara, Marge reprimanded. Jimmy stuck his tongue out at Tamara. Remember when Tiffany moved and you were really sad? Marge asked. In case you forgot, that was 2 years ago and she disappeared, Tamara answered. Jimmy ran upstairs and flung himself on his bed. What a crappy Saturday this had turned out to be so far. Suddenly he heard a car pull into the driveway. He looked out his window. His dad, Larry, was home. He quickly ran down the stairs. He opened the door. His dad stood there and a man stood behind him. Dad, who's that? Jimmy asked. He's our new employee at work and it turns out he's our new neighbor. He bought Cameron's house, Larry replied. Marge appeared. Well, come on in, Marge said. The man stepped in front of Larry. My name is Paul Johnson and I just moved in next door, Paul said. Well, come on in, Paul, and stay for dinner. It's the least we could do for our new neighbor, Marge said. Tamara looked him up and down. He looks like he should live with the Addams family, Tamara smarted off. Marge quickly gave Tamara a mean look. You're going to have to excuse my daughter. You know how teenagers are. Let's eat, Marge spoke. Paul quickly took a seat between Marge and Jimmy. My, what a lovely home you have, Paul complimented. Oh, why, thank you, Marge giggled. Tamara rolled her eyes. All the most exciting thing happened at work today, Larry chimed. Here we go again, Tamara muttered under her breath. Today we were informed about a new way to do people's taxes, Larry continued. Jimmy and Tamara quickly ate their meal. May we be excused, Jimmy and Tamara asked. Sure, Marge concluded. They left and both ran upstairs, but stopped when they reached the top. Do you notice how he cut his food into small bits and chewed them slowly, and didn't let anything touch, Jimmy asked. Oh, whatever. Some people are just like that. I'm going to see Joel, and if you tell Mom, you'll die, Tamara threatened. He watched as she tied her blanket to her bed post and rappelled out the window. He knew the routine. Jimmy made sure she was all the way to the ground and untied the blanket, turned her stereo up loud, closed the door, and locked it using a key she gave him. Jimmy was still a little curious about this Paul fellow. Jimmy crept quietly down the stairs and sat spying on them. After dessert, Paul stood up and said that he really must be going, and he had enjoyed the hospitality. As he walked past Jimmy, he gave him a wink and followed by a smile. Jimmy thought that was really creepy. He ran up to his dad. "Can I have a sleepover tonight, Dad?" Jimmy asked. "Yes, just because you were so nice to my new friend Paul," Larry replied. Jimmy had at least 2 other friends that he hadn't really talked to for a few months. He called each of them and they said that they would be over in about 30 minutes. Tonight was going to be awesome, even though the day had started off crappy. Chapter 3. The two boys quickly arrived. The 2 boys arrived quickly. Names were Lawrence and Jordan. They quickly ran upstairs to Jimmy's room. "So what are we going to do tonight?" Jordan asked. Jimmy smiled. "Since I helped Tamara not get caught by my mom, she got me a zombie apocalypse," Jimmy replied. "Dude, that doesn't even come out for 2 more months," Lawrence chimed. "Well, Tamara has people," Jimmy concluded. He reached under his bed and pulled out a suitcase. When he unzipped it, candy and chips bags fell out. "I've been saving this for this type of activity," Jimmy said. Jimmy put the movie into the VCR and turned out the lights. Suddenly his mom burst through the door. He quickly changed the channel. "Your father and I are going out. Behave yourself," Marge demanded. As soon as she closed the door, he pressed play. Paul watched as the car drove out of the driveway. He ran over to the next neighbor's house. He rang the doorbell and ran to the nearest bush. She stepped outside. Paul walked to the porch and asked to come in, but as soon as he was in, he grabbed a vase and smashed it over her head. She fell unconscious. Paul threw her body in the basement. The plan was working out well. The boys hid under their sleeping bags as the credits rolled on the screen. Suddenly the phone rang. They all jumped. Jimmy answered the phone. "Hello?" Jimmy asked. "How's the sleepover going, little boy?" Paul asked, but disguising his voice. Jimmy quickly put the phone down with a grim look on his face. "Guys, close all the windows. All lock the doors," Jimmy commanded. Just as Lawrence and Jordan left the room, the phone rang again. "Hello?" Jimmy answered. "You can try to close all the windows and hide from me, but it won't stop me. In fact, I can see you from outside right now," Paul replied. Jimmy ducked down with the phone still in his hand and slightly opened the curtain. A black car sat with its lights on in the street. He closed them quickly. "I know where you live too," Paul said. "Oh really? Then what street do I live on, and what does my house look like?" Jimmy asked. "You live on Lilac Street, and you live in the white 2-story house with no vehicle in the driveway," Paul replied. Jimmy let out a scream and hung up the phone. Lawrence and Jordan ran in. "What's going on?" Jordan asked. "Some person keeps calling the house and he's in the car outside," Jimmy answered. Lawrence ran over to the window and opened the curtains. The phone rang again. Jimmy answered it, but put it on speaker. "I love your friend's Mountain Dew pajamas," Paul said. Lawrence turned around wide-eyed. I can keep this up all night," Paul replied. The clock read 10 o'clock. Tamara sat at the table waiting for Joel to arrive. They had secretly been dating for a few months now. He walked in and they kissed. "I want to take you somewhere special tonight," Joel said. They ordered some food, ate it quickly, and left in his new Mustang. The wind whipped Tamara's hair back. It floated in the breeze. "So where are we going?" Tamara asked. Joel grinned. "You'll see." Joel replied. He pulled over. "I think my car has a flat. Will you go check in the back?" Joel asked. "Okay, honey bear," Tamara concluded. She opened her door and ran to the back of the Mustang. She noticed a smudge on the trunk. She looked closer to see what it was, but the trunk opened and hit her in the head. She fell on the ground unconscious. Joel picked her motionless body up and threw her into the trunk. Joel closed the passenger door and closed the trunk. His boss would be proud. Paul quit the calls. He was lucky because Larry and Marge returned home just as he had hung up. He quickly drove into his garage. All 3 boys hugged Marge and Larry as they walked through the door. "They must have missed us," Marge said. Chapter 4. Eventually the 3 boys fell asleep. They had told Marge and Lawrence what had happened. His mother had said it was just Tamara playing a trick on them. They slept soundly, undisturbed. Jimmy woke early. He was thirsty, so he walked downstairs to get a glass of water. He turned his head at the door. A black figure stood on the porch, but the frosted glass made it hard to see. Suddenly the figure ran away out of sight as Jimmy opened the door. A paper stuck out of the mailbox on the front porch. Jimmy opened the box and ran back inside, making sure to lock the door behind him. The paper was a page out of the phone book. Their phone number and address were circled in black marker and words were scribbled out, but Jimmy couldn't make them out. Jordan and Lawrence appeared. "Take a look at this note that was left in my mailbox," Jimmy said. Jordan took it, studying it carefully. "This definitely wasn't Tamara," Jordan replied. Tamara woke tied to a chair. Joel stood in the corner and a tall man hid in the darkness. "Did my guest sleep well?" Paul asked. "Who the heck are you?" Tamara replied. Paul stepped into the light. Tamara sat wide-eyed. "I knew you were a freak," Tamara yelled. "Wait till my dad finds out," Tamara warned. Paul smiled sinisterly. "I've injected you with a poison. If you don't tell anyone what has happened, then I will give you the antidote within 48 hours. You have that long to be silent. Your house will be under surveillance, and if you tell them, I'll kill your family after you die," Paul told. Tamara started to whimper. "Fine, you scumbag. I won't tell," Tamara concluded. Joel untied her, the door opened at the top of the steps, and Tamara walked out. She was free, but she had to be quiet about Paul for 2 days. A knock sounded at the door. Marge answered it. "Tamara, where on earth have you been?" Marge asked her daughter. "Oh, I was studying with Tammy," Tamara said. Marge smiled. "Have you been calling the house and scaring Jimmy?" Marge asked. Tamara fainted on the ground. Tamara awoke with an IV in her arm and her brother and parents standing beside her hospital bed. What happened?" Tamara asked. "You fainted. The doctors ran a test and you had some kind of poison in you. They gave you a liquid that would get rid of it," Larry replied. Tamara sat up quickly. Paul had watched out his window as Tamara fainted at the front door and the ambulance had taken her away. He got in his car and followed the ambulance closely, but not to draw a lot of attention. When he arrived at the hospital, he knocked out one of the doctors and stole his outfit. His disguise was working. Nobody noticed him at all. He grabbed a blue face mask and put it on to cover his mouth. A nurse had been kind enough to tell him where Tamara Richards' room was. Tamara looked at the doctor that had entered her room. She recognized him, but he held a finger to his lip. "I need to test Tamara to see if the poison has left her body. I'll have her back as convenient as possible," Paul said, disguising his voice once again. He grabbed her bed and started moving it towards the lab. As he walked in with the bed, a nurse stared at him. "You're not Dr. Bishop," she said. "What a sharp eye you have," Paul complimented. Paul picked up a small knife and threw it at her. It hit her directly in the heart. She fell to the floor dead. Tamara started to whimper. "If you make one more noise, you'll end up like her," Paul threatened. Chapter 5. He dragged the nurse's body into the closet and locked it. He picked up a needle and jammed it in Tamara. The screen showed no more of the poison inside her. "Have you told them anything?" Paul asked. "Do you really think that I had time? As soon as I got home, I fainted," Tamara replied. Paul got really close in her face. "Tell me the truth, you little brat," Paul yelled. Tamara located a bottle of something and smashed it over Paul's head. He fell back onto the operating table. With all her strength, she tied him down to the chair and walked out the door. She hung a sign that read "Operation in Progress" on the door, but as she walked out, his voice sent a chill down her spine. "You're going to pay for that," Paul said as she walked down the hall. The nurse walked by and saw how bad she looked, so she put her in a wheelchair and wheeled her back to her parents and brother that sat waiting in her room. "Well," Marge asked. "I'm poison-free," Tamara replied. They all walked out of the hospital and drove home, glad that Tamara was all better now. Paul struggled to get out. He finally freed one of his arms and undid the restraints. She would pay, and he knew exactly what he was going to do next. Then that night, everyone ate cake and ice cream for dessert, and they celebrated by eating dinner at Olive Garden. Everything was fine until a knock sounded at the door. Jimmy answered it. Paul came bursting through the door. He ran up to Jimmy. "I know what you did," Paul told. "I haven't done anything," Jimmy replied. "You stole my dog," Paul yelled. Marge and Larry both told Paul to calm down and that he should take a tour of the house with them to calm down. They started walking down the hall. Jimmy turned to Tamara. "He sure is a freak," Jimmy said. Even though it was against Tamara's better judgment, she had to hide her fear in talking about Paul's threats. "Shut up, butt-face," Tamara said. She ran up the stairs to her room. She slammed the door and locked it. Paul studied the house carefully as Larry and Marge walked him around. Every window or easy place to break in. "Please excuse me, but where is the restroom? I need to go," Paul asked. "Up the stairs and the third door on the left," Marge answered. His plan was working too well. They watched as he went up the stairs. He followed the instructions, and sure enough, it was right across from Jimmy's room. Paul pulled the puppy from his coat and set it down in Jimmy's room. He closed the door and crept down the stairs. Jimmy watched as Paul walked up the stairs and turned left towards his room in the bathroom. Moments later, he heard his father's yell. Paul walked up to Marge and Larry and told them that he had heard scratching on Jimmy's door. When he came out of the restroom, they quickly ran upstairs and opened the door. A small Labrador puppy waddled out. Larry yelled. Jimmy quickly arrived at the top of the stairs. Explain this, Larry said, pointing at the puppy. I didn't do that, Jimmy replied. Larry glared at his son. You're grounded for a week. No video games or television, Larry commanded. Paul picked up the puppy and left the house. Jimmy watched as he walked across the street to his house. Suddenly he turned around and smiled sinisterly at Jimmy. Chapter 6. The next day at school, Jimmy told Lawrence and Jordan what had happened since the hospital to the last night. We need to get into his house and see if he's hiding a secret. I have a professional lock-picking kit, Lawrence said. As they walked down the steps, the sky darkened and rain started to fall. "Aw, shoot," Jimmy remarked. Suddenly, a black car swerved right in front of him, and the doors opened. It was Paul. "Do you need a ride?" Paul asked. "No, thanks. My mom's coming," Jimmy replied, but he was interrupted. "Your mom called me and said she would be late, so I could come pick you up," Paul concluded. Jimmy slid into the car. He closed the door, and Paul drove quickly out of the parking lot. "Let's go for a little drive." "Where do you want to go?" Paul asked. "How about home?" Jimmy answered. "Okay," Paul replied. He turned a corner and headed towards Jimmy's house, but he passed it. "Hey, what's the big idea?" Jimmy yelled. Paul took the exit to Seaside Cliff. When they reached the cliff's edge, Paul stopped the car and turned the engine off. "Did she tell you anything?" Paul asked. "What are you talking about?" Jimmy replied. "Did Tamara tell you anything strange about me?" Paul answered. "No," Jimmy concluded. Jimmy tried to open the door, but it was locked. Paul reached into his seat and pulled out a detonator. "Tell me the truth, or we're both going over the edge in a fiery explosion," Paul yelled. "She didn't tell me anything, you idiot. She fainted, and then when you came over last night, she ran upstairs and hid in her room," Jimmy replied. Paul started the car and drove back towards town. He dropped Jimmy off at his house. "If you tell anyone, you'll pay," Paul warned. He watched as Jimmy ran inside. Jimmy ran upstairs and closed his bedroom door. He took out a piece of paper and dialed Lawrence's phone number. He answered it. "I need you to remember back to the night that the man was calling us. Did you manage to get the plate or the brand of car?" Jimmy asked. "I remember that it was black," Lawrence replied. He wrote "black car" on the paper with a lead pencil. He hung up the phone and wrote "strange man" above black car and put a line under it. Then Paul Johnson on the other with a line under it too. Jimmy was determined to find out who had done the phone calls. Chapter 7. 1 month had passed since the car ride with Paul. His birthday was in 4 weeks, December 12th. Jimmy ran downstairs. Today was his 12th birthday. His mom had made waffles. "Happy birthday, Marge," said. She sat down and started to shove and Jimmy started to shove waffles into his mouth. "Slow down," Marge continued. A knock sounded at the door. He ran over to answer it. He was expecting it to be someone wishing him a happy birthday, but it was Paul. He held a box wrapped in red wrapping paper. A bow was glued on top. "Happy birthday, neighbor," Paul said with a big smile. Jimmy closed the door after he grabbed the gift. He walked over to the trash can and was about to drop it in when his mother stopped him. "You know, we don't get rid of gifts from neighbors," Marge reminded. He went to the table and started unwrapping the gift. He pulled out a webcam. "Ooh, that looks cool," Marge chimed in. Jimmy ran upstairs to his room. He plugged the USB cable into his computer. He was about to use it till his mother called him downstairs to set up for the party. Paul sat in his recliner. His plan was working out quite well. He watched the screen in front of him. The weatherman was saying that a big snowstorm was heading east, and it would hit soon. The party guests arrived just on time. Jimmy and his mother had just hung the last balloon when a knock sounded at the door. He had invited Lawrence, Jordan, Paul, his grandma, his grandpa, and he had achieved Cameron's new number, so he invited him also. All the guests stood on the door except Cameron. He invited them in. They all went into the backyard. Tamara looked out her window. Paul and a few other people she knew stood on the front porch. Paul looked up at her and smiled. She had overheard the present conversation between her mom and brother. She crept quietly into her brother's room and looked at the new webcam that sat atop his computer. Tamara turned on the computer screen. She could see herself in the mirror on the computer. Paul's phone beeped. He reached into his pocket. Someone had turned the webcam on. Time to try out his plan and see if it worked. He clicked the on button. He could see Jimmy's room. Paul quietly slipped the phone back into his pocket. It had worked. Lawrence walked up to Jimmy. "I brought my lock-picking kit. Everyone will be busy talking so we can sneak into his house," Lawrence said. "Okay, after we're done eating," Jimmy replied with a smirk. His mom brought out the food. Lawrence and Jimmy ran over to the table. Tamara had a special way of telling Jimmy what happened to her for real. She noticed that the wires had been rearranged on the webcam. She found that weird, but she ignored it. Little did she know what the whole family was about to get into. Chapter 8. Jimmy and Lawrence ate quickly. Jordan walked up to them. They told him their intentions. They were just about to leave, but Jimmy's mom called him over. "It's your dad. He wants to wish you happy birthday over the phone since he couldn't leave work," Marge told her son. He grabbed the phone. "Happy birthday, son. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there," Larry said. "Thanks, and it's okay. Well, I have to go now. Bye," Jimmy said. All three boys snuck out of the yard through the gate unnoticed. They ran over to Paul's house, and Lawrence pulled open the lockpick, started working on the doorknob. A few seconds passed, and the door opened with a click. They stepped inside the house, making sure to close the door behind them. Tamara watched as the boys snuck out through the back gate and ran over to Paul's house. The door opened. She had to finish her special birthday present. She had managed to make 2 copies. She would show the non-special one at the party and give the special one to Jimmy later. Paul had enjoyed the food. He ate slowly and watched everything that was going on. It sure was a joyous occasion. He continued eating slowly and smiling after each bite. The boys looked around. It looked like a normal home. Paintings hung on the wall, a television sat on an entertainment center, and he had a few knickknacks. Lawrence spotted a new smartphone on the table. He ran over and pressed the power button. It beeped on. Paul's phone vibrated. He pulled it out of his pocket and looked at it. His other phone had been activated. Someone had probably broken into his home. He walked over to Marge, thanked her for the food, and said he needed to run home real quick, and he did. Lawrence marveled at the shiny black phone. It was a real fancy piece of technology. Suddenly the doorknob rattled, causing him to drop the phone in shock. They quickly ran to a door and tried the handle. It opened into a dark basement. "I don't like the dark," Jordan whimpered. Lawrence and Jimmy pushed him forward, and together they all ran down the stairs into the darkness. They had made sure to close the door behind them. Paul opened the door. Everything looked normal, but then he spotted his phone on the floor. He picked it up. "I know someone's in here," Paul said. He walked over to the door. He had taped a hair on the door. He looked at it. It had been broken in half. Paul slowly opened the door and went down the stairs 1 step at a time. A hole that one boy could fit in was on the wall. Lawrence climbed in the hole. Suddenly a faint light filled the room. A pile of wood lay in the corner. Jimmy carefully picked up a few pieces and crouched into a tiny space he had made. He put the logs on top of him. He was well concealed. Jordan hid beneath the wooden stairs. They all waited in silence as Paul slowly walked down the stairs. Paul switched on the lights. Nobody could be seen. Suddenly a cat jumped out. Maybe the cat had pushed open the door. It was a flimsy old thing anyway. A picture hung on the wall. A woman in a bridal dress and 2 children stood in it. Paul smiled and walked up the stairs. A window could be seen across the room by Jimmy. Jordan opened the window and started to crawl through it. The other 2 boys followed close behind. Little did they know that one of Jimmy's shoes had fallen off until it was too late to get it back. The boys ran home as fast as they could. Chapter 9. When the boys reached the yard, it was empty. Suddenly a flashing light shone through the window. They ran inside. They walked in. It was dark and a projector lay propped on some books and a screen hung from the ceiling. Tamara pressed the play button, but a knock sounded at the door. Marge answered it. It was Paul, with a shoe in his hand. "I believe your son dropped his shoe in my basement," Paul said. Marge turned around and glared at Jimmy. Paul handed her the shoe, but then he looked up and saw a video playing on the screen. He wanted to watch. He snuck over and grabbed a disc that lay on the table and left the party. He ran home and put it into his DVD player. It was a video of Tamara saying a bunch of mumble-jumble about how glad she was that she was Jimmy's sister, but a few words showed on the screen after it was over. He fast-forwarded it and then replayed it. Paul did this and a new video showed. He watched, but his smile turned into a frown as he listened. Tamara was telling Jimmy about what Paul had said and had done to her. He opened the DVD tray, grabbed the CD, and put it in his computer. He was going to make a few changes. Paul climbed through Tamara's window. The family had gone somewhere. Now was the perfect opportunity. He placed her on her bed and left, making sure to close the window. As soon as the family got home, Tamara ran upstairs. The CD sat on her bed. It was the extra copy of Jimmy's birthday video. "Oh, so that's where I put it," Tamara said. Just to make sure it was perfect, she put it in her computer. But it was very different. Paul's face shone on the screen now. "I know what you tried to do." "I erased it and made my own little video," Paul smirked. Suddenly he pulled a chair over to him. A girl lay unconscious. It was Tiffany. Tamara gasped out loud. "You have 3 hours to decide to break the CD copy you made." "Oh, yes, I know." "Or your family will suffer," Paul said. The screen went blank. Tamara started to sob quietly. Chapter 10. Tamara paced across her room. What to do? How would Paul even know if she broke the CD? She looked at her clock. She had put the video in at 5 o'clock. The clock now read 6 o'clock. She had 2 hours to decide. A rock hit her window. It broke through, and a note was attached to it. It read, "You better hurry." Suddenly Paul appeared outside. It was dark, so no one but her could see Paul. He twirled his finger. She flipped the rock over. It contained another note. Tamara had to go over to his house and break both CDs in front of him. She let out a sigh, grabbed the CDs, and repelled out her window. She walked through the front door of Paul's house. She didn't bother to close it. Paul sat on a chair. A lamp glowed in the distance. "I see you got the note," Paul smirked. The CDs lay in her hand. She raised her knee and broke them over it. Pieces of CD shattered everywhere. "You have made a smart decision, but it has consequences," Paul said. Suddenly the door swung closed and a man put a cloth over her mouth. She fainted. She opened her eyes. Tiffany was tied to a chair right next to her. They were in a basement. Paul stood in the corner. "What do you want with me?" Tamara yelled. "You'll find out soon enough," Paul replied. Suddenly the wind picked up and it became dark. "I think the storm's here," Paul said sinisterly. Chapter 11. Larry started his car and headed towards home. He decided to take the freeway, but little did he know that was a mistake. Snow started to fall. He turned on his heater and sped up a little. Suddenly a car came speeding at him. Before he could turn, he was hit by the car. His car spun out of control and hit a cement wall. He lay in his car unconscious. That's all he remembered before he went unconscious. The man in the car walked over to Larry's car. He opened the door and dragged the man into a truck that had pulled up right after the collision. The truck sped off. Marge turned the burner on. She was just about to start dinner. The sky suddenly turned dark and snow started to fall. "Oh, come on," Marge yelled. A knock sounded at the door, and she answered it. It was Paul. "Could you help me start a fire? I don't know how to start regular ones. I have always had an electric one in my home," Paul begged. Marge walked with him over to the house. She walked over to the fireplace and bent over with some paper in her hand. Paul picked up a piece of wood and hit her over the head with it. She slumped to the floor unconscious. He dragged her into the basement and lay her right next to her unconscious husband. Tamara tried to scream, but it was muffled by duct tape. 3 down, 1 to go. After going out to dinner for his birthday, Jimmy had begged his parents to let him go to Lawrence's house. They did. When his mother failed to answer the phone or pick him up, Mrs. Florence offered to drive him home. His spine tingled as he walked into the dark house. As she pulled out of the driveway, a man started running towards him. Jimmy slammed the door and locked it. He ran to his parents' room and ran into the closet where he knew they always kept a loaded pistol. He quickly slipped under the bed just as the front door bursted open. His parents' door suddenly opened, and a man walked in. He started searching the room as he neared closer to the bed. Jimmy aimed at his leg. He fired the gun. The man fell to the ground, letting out a scream. Jimmy crawled out from his hiding place and grabbed some tape from a bedside table. "You're going to pay for that," the man yelled. "Oh, shut up," Jimmy replied as he taped the man's mouth, legs, and hands together. The man tried to break free, but Jimmy picked up a vase and smashed it over his head. The man slumped unconscious. As he walked down the stairs, a faint smell of gas filled the house. He quickly ran to the burner and turned it off. Where was his family? A plan came to Tamara's mind as Paul carried a tray with silverware on it. He walked up to her and ripped the tape off her face. He set the tray in her lap. "How exactly am I supposed to eat this?" Tamara asked. Paul smiled and went back up the stairs. Her plan had worked. She was able to slip one arm out, and she did. With a swift motion, she grabbed the knife and started working on the ropes that kept her tied up. They broke quickly just as Paul started coming downstairs. She put the knife back quickly. Just as Paul started to pick up the fork to feed her, she kicked him in the leg and he fell. She stood up and started to run up the stairs, but Paul grabbed her leg and she fell on the steps. He stood up and smiled at Marge and Larry. "This one sure is feisty. I think I'll kill her first," Paul said. He grabbed Tamara by the hair and started walking her up the steps. His helper sat on the couch eating chips. "Get off the freaking couch, you cow, and go guard our guests," Paul yelled. A cold wind hit his face as he opened it. He continued to go into the backyard. She bit him on the hand, and as he let go, she slipped and hit her head on the cement path. Tamara let out a scream of pain. Jimmy sat in the kitchen examining a butcher knife. He heard a scream. He quickly ran to the window and opened it slightly. Paul was pulling Tamara by her hair to the backyard. He had to save her. He grabbed the pistol, put it in his belt. He also grabbed the knife and kept it in his coat pocket. He turned the burner back on. Jimmy opened the door quickly. He ran to Paul's house in the white world outside. Chapter 12. Jimmy opened the door slowly. No one was in the living room. Paper was in the fireplace. He immediately had a plan. He walked in quietly and grabbed the box of matches. He lit one and threw it in the fire. Flames started rising in the fireplace. The flue wasn't open. His plan was working. He crouched in the corner. If Paul had any helpers, he could take them. Marge awoke. A big man sat on the steps. Tamara was gone, and her husband was awake. She wiggled her fingers. She could easily slip out of the ropes. I'm hungry, Marge said. The man tossed her a bag of potato chips that he'd been eating out of. I want a meal like Tamara had, Marge said. He stood up and started to walk up the stairs. They creaked with each footstep. Jimmy pulled out the pistol as he heard footsteps coming. A big man walked past him. He hadn't even noticed Jimmy. He aimed the gun at the big man and fired. He fell to the floor. 3 in the back and 1 in the leg. It was perfect. He saw a food tray on the table. He picked it up and headed downstairs. The man had closed the door. She had just gotten out of the ropes as the door opened. Marge was ready to attack, but instead her son came through the door. He ran down the stairs and gave his mom the tray and a hug. His mother stood up and cut her husband's ropes. Paul has Tamara. Hurry, Marge begged. Jimmy turned around and ran up the stairs. A big pit lay in the middle of the yard. It had water in it. Are you going to say? Sorry, Paul asked. Tamara spit in his face. Go to heck, Tamara yelled. Paul pushed Tamara into the pit. Cold water covered her body as she fell into the now icy water. Paul turned around. Don't worry, if you manage to escape, I left you a friend to play with, Paul said. He whistled and a pit bull stood at the edge of the pit. Don't worry, he won't jump in. He's not stupid, Paul continued. She watched as Paul walked away. Jimmy opened the door, but he heard footsteps, so he closed the door and ran back down to the basement. He crawled into the hole that Lawrence had hidden in. His mother and father understood and made it look like the ropes had been cut off, but each parent held a knife. Paul walked into his house. He was thirsty, so he walked in the kitchen. His assistant lay dead on the linoleum floor. He opened the basement door. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Paul walked up to Marge. Would you like to explain to me how come my assistant is dead, Paul asked. Marge sat silent. Do you remember when we took this picture? Paul asked as he took the picture off the wall. Marge let out a gasp. How could I have been so stupid? I didn't even recognize you, Marge said. Paul smiled. After you left me, I vowed revenge. I changed my appearance and eventually tracked you and the kids down, Paul continued. Larry sat shocked. What she didn't tell you? Paul asked. Marge's hands tightened around the knife. She thought I was going crazy. She sent me to counselors and everything. She left me and took the kids. I vowed revenge. I eventually tracked you 3 down. I threatened the family that used to live in the house. They left quickly, Paul continued. He cleared his throat and looked at Larry. Did I mention that Larry had an affair? That's how Tiffany got brought in this, Paul said. Marge turned and looked at Larry. After you moved to this town, I caught up with you before I moved here. I eventually saw you and him on a date, and after that he went to some woman's house. To get revenge for what he had done to you, I kidnapped her and have kept her here till her previous father decided to come rescue her, Paul concluded. How come you never told me, Marge sobbed. I didn't want to hurt you, Larry replied. In conclusion, Jimmy and Tamara are my children, and Tiffany is some other ladies, Paul said. Ice eventually started to form. Tamara quickly made a sharp icicle out of it. She started to climb out. The dog lay sleeping on its side. She quickly crawled out, but the snow crunched and the dog awoke. He lunged at Tamara. She fell backward just as the dog was about to strike. She stabbed it with the icicle. It staggered backwards and fell into the pit. She tried to walk, but she was too cold. Her eyes started to get heavy, and she fainted. Jimmy loaded the gun and crawled out of the pit. Back up, Paul, Jimmy yelled. He turned around and backed up. You wouldn't hurt your dad, would you? Paul asked. You're not my dad, you're a sick freak, Jimmy said. He was about to fire, but his mother quickly stabbed Paul in the back. He fell to the ground in anguish. Run, Jimmy yelled. His mother ran up the stairs, but his dad quickly picked up Tiffany and carried her up the stairs. Jimmy followed closely. Hurry, we have to get to the house, Jimmy warned. They all ran into the house. Go upstairs and hide under the bed, Jimmy commanded. He ran into the kitchen and hid by the counter. Paul pulled the knife out of his back and continued up the stairs. He saw the door open at the house. He was going to finish this once and for all. He grabbed a gas can filled with gas and marched towards the house. Tamara stood up with all the strength she had left and walked towards her house. Paul had just walked in. She reached in her pocket. She had forgotten she had a match. With a smile, she walked towards the house. Jimmy loaded the gun once more. Just as footsteps entered the house, he stood up. Paul stood there holding a gas can. Jimmy shot the can, and gas spewed on Paul, and a puddle formed at his feet. I'm not coming any closer, Paul said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a box of matches. Let's have some fun, Paul laughed. Tamara reached the porch. Paul stood in the kitchen holding a gas can and a box of matches. She reached in her pocket and pulled out the lighter she had. Paul lit a match. He smiled as the flames danced at the tip. Hey, Paul, how about a smoke? Tamara asked. He turned around. She tossed the flaming lighter at him. He caught on fire. Suddenly a hot blast hit her. She flew backwards unconscious. Jimmy ducked as Tamara threw the lighter. The house started to burn. He ran out the now broken glass door. Marge, Larry, and Tiffany heard the explosion. Suddenly fire filled the hall outside. They ran to the window and opened it. Each person slid down the roof quickly. The windows broke with a hiss, and the house was now in flames. They ran over to Tamara and held her head up. She was unconscious. Suddenly sirens blared. Jimmy ran over them and gave them a big hug. I love you guys, Jimmy said as Paul's body burned in the house. Epilogue. Tamara recovered, but due to frostbite, she had to have one of her legs amputated. Mary and Large made up and forgave each other. The house had insurance on it, so they were able to get a new one in a really nice neighborhood filled with non-crazy neighbors. Tiffany moved in the house. Jimmy won an award for writing a book about his experiences. Everything turned out well in the end. Sometimes it's hard to love your neighbor, especially if they're crazy. That's an original story I wrote, and you can buy this on Lulu.com. I had it published, and if you like it a lot, you can buy it. If you watch this video, thanks for watching. This is my first little time doing this, and I hope you liked my story. And once again, you can buy this on Lulu. It's for ebook, and it's like $2. And I actually know this one is an actual book. You can get an actual book format with a hardcover and everything. And it's like 10 because Lulu won't let you go down past 10 if you publish a book. So thanks for watching, and bye.